I've had a really amazing career journey with Salesforce. I feel like now the world of jobs is found through your network. When you're thinking about the types of jobs you want to have in the Salesforce ecosystem, think about what skill sets you can bring to the table. So I would say join the LinkedIn groups of people trying to learn Salesforce and just ask for work.
Welcome to Salesforce Radio, your destination for insights, news, and community connections within the dynamic Salesforce ecosystem.
Amanda, welcome to the podcast. It's really a pleasure to have you. And kind of as we had talked about when we first met, wanted to have you here to just share a little bit of your journey into the world of Salesforce and, give us some insight of where people maybe who are finding themselves just getting into Salesforce or looking into moving forward with their career. Just some insight into that and see, how they can further themselves, but also hear what you think about what's going on in the ecosystem right now. I just got back from London. I was there for the App Exchange Live conference, which was really cool. Always great to meet with people from Salesforce in person, also customers. And there's definitely some exciting things. Obviously, the big thing this year is AI, as it was last year. And hopefully this year we're actually going to see where it takes us. But thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much. So I started my Salesforce journey about 10 years ago now, and I had just finished university. I had studied a business degree in Canada and wasn't really feeling the regular path of management consulting, accounting, CPG marketing. So I found myself in the sales training program at Coca-Cola as my first job, which was obviously a big name to have on the resume, really cool company. But the job itself, I found it was really individualistic. Like you had a territory, you were going out, you were seeing customers, but there wasn't as much of a team aspect that I realized I was really looking for. So I had a friend who was working at Salesforce in their SR department at the time, which is the sales rep when you start at the bottom of the sales totem pole at Salesforce. And he was like, you got to come over here. It's super fun. It's a great place to work. So he helped me interview and I ended up getting the job, which was great because it really started me on this amazing trajectory of getting into the tech ecosystem without potentially being a developer, but learning all these amazing skills to communicate with different types of companies and learning their needs. And so I really enjoyed the entire job. I really enjoyed everyone I got to work with. And that's what really started me on the Salesforce path.
And before that, when you were looking for jobs, when you started with Coca-Cola, was tech something you were thinking about? Was it something you wanted to get into?
If I'm being honest, I don't know if I necessarily had a really clear direction. I was never someone that was like, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be an accountant. Like I never felt that way. I feel like I was always kind of entrepreneurial in a sense. Like I always had lots of good ideas, but I didn't necessarily want to or care to execute on anyone in any full way. But sales was really fun for me because I really enjoyed being with people, presenting. I've always enjoyed presenting. And I also just enjoyed trying to solve a problem for an organization. And the extent of my techness was probably an HTML, page when I was a kid. That was more of a creative side of things as opposed to actual coding. So this was a really good starting point into a career that would lead to a lot of value over the long term. So I'm really appreciative that my friend kind of brought me in the door here to see how we could leverage tech in the business sense.
Yeah, it's like, I say this often, but Salesforce for some people is like the brand that they carry with them, whether they work for Salesforce or not, or work in the ecosystem. But for so many other people, like, my family, for example, and my friends that have nothing to do with the tech world, don't know anything about Salesforce. It's always funny to me that they've interacted with Salesforce across many different brands without ever knowing it. And the kind of face of Salesforce being, it's like Salesforce has this very big presence in the tech world and in the industry, but oftentimes the people, who are actually interfacing with Salesforce, they never know it because their data is being stored there because that was the decision made by the company that they're working with, whether it's, any of the big brands that you shop in a store or, some member program. And I always find that really to be kind of interesting. And then what happens always is after, I speak with someone and have that conversation, a week later, they're like, oh, I watched the Super Bowl and I saw the Salesforce commercial and it's so cool that you work for Salesforce. And I'm like, I don't work for Salesforce. There's actually, I don't even know how many companies around the world, I don't think anyone knows, that are part of this ecosystem that are making it work together with Salesforce. And, I always just kind of love that array and that beautiful kind of mural that they create.
Well, and I have to say, like, I've had a really amazing career journey with Salesforce. So I really can tip my hat to them to say thank you for the career that I've been able to have, because I've been able to build skills across sales. And so I was at Salesforce for about 3 years in the sales area, working my way up from sales rep to business development rep, where you're doing just cold calling, and then carrying a territory as an account executive. And then I just realized after those 3 years that I really enjoyed more of the implementation side than the actual sales side. My manager actually used to get mad at me because I was spending too much time helping my small clients implement that, selling more to other companies. So that was probably a good indicator for me to say, okay, I should probably be on the implementation side. And that's when I moved to a company called Traction on Demand, which was a fairly large Canadian-based implementation partner for Salesforce. And what was amazing about working for them was the whole company just focused on Salesforce implementations. And so you just had, honestly, hundreds of people living and breathing Salesforce solutions every single day. And so the rate at which I learned about how the platform could be used across all the different industries was super cool. So you could see it applied to almost every industry, solving different problems. And then even if the problem was in one industry, you can sometimes apply that same problem to another one. And I just felt like I was learning a ton over the 4 years that I worked there. And it was so fun to be able to solve a lot of different problems with the platform that way.
So when you got that job, what was your official job title? What did you apply for?
Yeah, I started as a junior project manager, and it was a good entry point for me because I wasn't technical, so I wasn't necessarily wanting to build on the platform per se, but I'm very organized. And in that role, you also kind of acted as a business analyst at the time as well. So you were gathering requirements, you were managing the project scope, budget, and timelines. And at the time, I was actually thrown on a fairly hefty project out of the Toronto office that covered 4 or 5 clouds. It was many multi-million dollars of business, and it had kind of stalled at the point that I had joined it. And so I really focused on trying to help the project move forward by making the adults make decisions, is what I always used to say. I would say okay, team, we're not leaving the room until we have a decision. And yeah, we were able to progress the project and get it completed. And that's when I learned that I'm very good at helping to facilitate different groups of people to make decisions and keep the project moving along in a way that still adds value, but it's not, you don't just cycle on the same decisions over and over and over again.
So you mentioned that when you started in that position, you weren't technical. And obviously that's a word that gets thrown around a lot. I've seen people come on, a demo and say to the customer, are you technical? And they're like, well, I'm not technical. I am technical. And obviously it's a bit of a vague, way to describe oneself. Where do you see yourself now? Are you technical at this point? Has that been passed, or do you still feel like you're, helping with the project and the organization?
Okay. So this is how I qualify it. I am technical enough to be dangerous in the way that I understand all of the technical terminology. I understand how to evaluate different technical solutions. I can build and configure on Salesforce up to a point, but the minute you have to, if you say flow, I'm probably not going to be able to do flows yet. Any type of process automation I can't actually do, but I know what's possible to do. If I have the right team, I can explain in a lot of detail what needs to get done and how it should be tested and all the different considerations for it. And the reason I'm able to do that was I was paired with some really amazing solution architects with me, and we really acted as a team. So I would be listening, I would be the one that's in charge of the requirements, and they would be in charge of the solution. And what that pairing does is allow me basically to understand, okay, for these types of requirements, this is an ideal solution and how it should be solved. And sometimes on bigger, more complex projects, you're evaluating a couple different decisions around those requirements. And so then you're able to say okay, in this scenario, we could have done it this way, but the reason we didn't was X, Y, and Z. So I felt like I learned a ton being paired with some really amazing solution architects, and that I was basically able to upgrade my technical knowledge through that partnership.
So before we go any further, because I want to hear a little bit about, what interests you today. What is your current position? What are you doing? And tell us a little bit about the type of projects that I guess you work on now and what you're doing in the ecosystem.
Yeah. So I'm the owner of Amanda Perkins Consulting Inc. And right now I really focus, I'm mostly a subcontractor to other Salesforce SI partners and or sometimes just strategy consultants. So I've kind of bridged the gap between the business technology side, and sometimes we've moved into the people process organizational design side. And it's kind of just been a natural progression. So I am currently subcontracting at 4 different companies, which sounds like a lot, but they're all different types of work. And I think that helps me because I like to have lots of different things on the go. So for 2 of them, I'm helping 2 different partners build up their practice because my experience with Traction on Demand, I've seen lots of different types of projects. And so to help them scope projects, help them know what statements of work should look like, figuring out how to resource projects so that they're set up for success, considerations on, different tooling sets, et cetera. So I'm doing that for 2 different companies right now. And then on the other one, I'm doing more, I kind of moved into the nonprofit side of things last year. And that's been really great for me to learn how Salesforce applies to that industry. And so for the nonprofits right now, I'm helping oversee is probably the incorrect word, but they have an implementation partner, and I'm the bridge kind of between the business and the technical partner so that I can help facilitate decisions and help kind of move that process along for the bigger projects. So I kind of have like lots of different hats on right now, which is my favorite type of work. And it's allowed me to kind of work remotely, which has been a huge additional life upgrade for me. And so, yeah, it's been working out quite well over the last few years.
That's really cool to hear. So it sounds like there's 2 kind of roles that you're playing. One is sort of in this business development role for these SI partners, and the other is, in the kind of consultant role, or at least the go-between between partners and the actual clients themselves. And it's interesting what you say about nonprofits, because as someone who has, helped a lot of nonprofits use Titan as a solution for Salesforce, I've seen that the word nonprofit really is about as vague as you could get for the nonprofit space, right? Because a nonprofit could be a very small, organization helping, immigrants or refugees with a very small budget. And it could be a massive, grant writing foundation. That's one of Salesforce's, great customers that it's putting all these resources into. What have you found in the nonprofit space to be interesting to you? Where do you see the opportunity for yourself there?
Yeah, great question. So at another organization I was working with last year, I was actually doing a lot of the hands-on building of the nonprofit solutions using Salesforce solutions last year. And I think nonprofits are doing such wonderful work. But what I am noticing is that the solutions are still quite complex in order to adopt them. And it's just kind of like the brunt of Salesforce, unfortunately, is that it is a very technically complex platform in the sense that it can do a lot of things depending on what you'd like it to do. But for a small nonprofit, they don't have a lot of resources. They don't have like a center of excellence. They probably don't even have budget for like one admin. It's a pretty difficult platform to maintain if it's not set up properly. So that's kind of it's an interesting balance that I'm trying to always manage with the nonprofits to say, okay, looking at like what resourcing you have, what solution is actually going to be something that you're going to be able to adopt and use and is going to be valuable, as opposed to being like, here's all the bells and whistles Salesforce has to offer for you. 1, it's probably too expensive. And 2, it's not going to be adopted because they don't have the time and they're like very overwhelmed to manage it. So where's that like lower middle ground where you can say like, okay, you're getting out of Excel, like we're out of Excel now. That's really like the step that we're at. And now you have like everything at least in one place, but everything in one place is still very basic. And then, so there's some considerations there in the future, I'd say, for Salesforce to say, how do we just make this easier and just say like, these are the best practices, use it this way. And it's more of a tightly combined package for nonprofits, especially the small ones.
Yeah. And I think from what I've seen, there's a huge difference in the industry between nonprofits who maybe implemented in the last, let's say 2-3 years, and nonprofits who have now been on Salesforce for a long time. And were kind of, they kind of came into Salesforce because there was this great offering for nonprofits. Hey, we could have an enterprise solution for pretty much for free. And then over the years, they realized we do need to invest in this. Then they invested a little bit here, a little bit there, had an admin, had a volunteer admin. People did all sorts of crazy things in there. And now a lot of times there's technical debt. They have to figure out how to, go ahead and further themselves. And that sometimes becomes this kind of tricky thing for them. And then you have nonprofits today who are coming into Salesforce. They're bringing in a partner. But still you have ones that are just like jumping into Salesforce, not really knowing what they're going into. I guess from your experience, do you have any advice for nonprofits thinking about, going on to Salesforce, or nonprofits who have been in Salesforce for a long time, but aren't really seeing the value that they think they can get out of it?
Yeah. So for American nonprofits, so 501c3s, there is a free platform called Give Lively, and it's built by philanthropists. And it's a giving platform. So it's the page where you go on the website and you say, like, I want to donate $5 or $10 or whatever. And I've implemented that now for a few different clients, and it has a native integration to Salesforce. And so as a free platform, it works very well, like very good support. It works well. And integrates into Salesforce so that you can really modernize your giving structure, especially for like really lean nonprofits. It's a really good solution. To be honest, I have not yet seen Nonprofit Cloud. So I know that that's been a big transition in the space. I have been implementing a combination of the Nonprofit Success Pack with, it's called Project Management Module. So it's two different packages. And those two together, I would say, have been a fabulous combination to manage the development side of the house and the program side of the house. The data structure makes sense. Everyone seems to like generally get it. It gives them the reporting they need. They're able to connect like where the money's coming in and the money is going out and the reporting side there. And so I've done that probably like 4 or 5 times over now, and it works. So I like that structure. With Nonprofit Cloud, I know that it's a bit of a different data structure, and it also does work a little bit differently with Give Lively. But for a little time there, I think that like trifecta of Give Lively, Nonprofit Success Pack, and the project management model, if set up like at least in a basic way for the nonprofit, is a very good starting point for them to manage their whole operations.
Yeah, I now that you're saying that, I've actually seen that a lot, because a lot of times I'll kind of see people when they're coming to that next stage where they've had, Give Lively, they've had kind of the basic architecture in Salesforce for the nonprofits, and they haven't done so much to, no big implementation projects, but they're kind of using what's out of the box. And a lot of times that is a really good place to be, where you're actually not trying to get too fancy. You're trying to just do things in a normal way. And then basically what will happen is people have Salesforce for, a little bit, maybe it's a year, maybe it's a couple of years. And then they'll come to me at Titan and say, hey, okay, we've been, accepting donations here. We've been, getting leads here. We've been still kind of generating documents sort of manually in our back office, printing them out, putting signatures. Now we're kind of looking to put that all together, and we're looking to now have, our event pages be dynamic and come from Salesforce in real time. We want to have, all of the document generation automated and be on, in flows, because now they've been with the system a while. They're saying, okay, now we understand we can start automating things, and we want to have, documents coming into the system and being sent out to donors, because that's a huge thing also. And also the donor recognition is really huge, and a huge part of any nonprofit, because that's how they're running. So how do we make that experience good? And then sometimes they'll also come and say, hey, listen, we want to have some sort of, user zone where they can come in, they can log in, they can see their information, and Experience Cloud isn't always the right solution for them. So they look to us and say, hey, maybe we can make some sort of, gated form interface where we can come in, maybe update information, interact with us. I was just speaking with someone yesterday. They want to do like really simple booking spaces, for their community center. Use case that a lot of people are talking about. We were able to show them how they could do it. And the nice thing about using a tool like ours, which is an ISV, is that the maintenance is low, right? And we're completely integrated with Salesforce. So I really appreciate you kind of talking about trifecta and how that's really good in the beginning for a lot of people. So if anyone's listening to this and they're thinking about getting into Salesforce, where they're, they already started, but they don't really know what they're doing, I would definitely say take that advice, as a first step.
Well, and the reason I say that too is I've had some nonprofits buy a lot of the platform right out the gate, and it's really hard and it's overwhelming to do all at once. Like to learn Pardot, to learn Salesforce, to learn Tableau. I appreciate that over time there's value there. So I don't want to undersell the Salesforce to say like, depending on the situation, but a lot of these nonprofits don't have the capacity at the forefront to be implementing Tableau. Like they probably don't really need it, until there's some large organization that has massive reporting needs, or they really truly have extra data sources that they need to bring in. Sometimes I see like a little bit of like overselling there, which I appreciate. Like, the Tableau guys got to make their numbers, but for the best interests of the nonprofit, I really think they should start small and grow into the platform.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I've seen, those kind of the situations where they don't really know what they're using and why they're using it. And where things really work well is when they kind of start small and they see, hey, this is how we like to use Salesforce. This is where we see value in it. Then you can add those pieces in, as time goes on. So that's really interesting. And what are some of the other industries you've worked in that you found interesting and found that really gained a lot of value from Salesforce?
Interesting question. One of my favorite projects was a US-based immigration law firm, and we set up all of the steps. Well, we categorized all the different visas to immigrate to the US. They called it alphabet soup because it's like a B visa, a C visa, et cetera. And then created all of the steps that it takes to go from not having a visa to getting a visa, all in Salesforce. And it was so smart because realistically, all the different categories have fairly standard steps. And a lot of visa processes are not that transparent. So the whole goal of this law firm was to add transparency to everyone who is putting an application through. And it makes so much sense. So we were able to build a portal. And so people would always know like exactly when they needed to share documents, when they need to provide new information, general timing and guidelines on like how long things take once the application's with the government. And I really liked working on that project. It was hard. It was complex. I was working with lots of lawyers, which you can imagine they were very set in their ways, but they were a really good group. And I felt really proud of that project because of how it turned out. I think we did a good job with that one. And then when I was at Traction, I actually transitioned into a product management role where we were building a Salesforce solution for our delivery team to manage requirements so that over time they could see a requirement and they could pull the user stories ahead of time. Because as you can imagine, like especially with a company like Traction where they're doing hundreds of projects all at once, there's so many similar requirements and so much similar solutioning to those same requirements that we should be able to recycle the best solutions for those requirements. And so I had this brilliant team at Traction. They put like the best developers, QAs on it. And I just have never worked on a team where everyone was so excellent at their roles that it like was almost boring because there was just no conflict. Like everyone was just so good at what they were doing. We had like a clear cycle. We had our requirements, we would groom our requirements. Everyone would know exactly what they were doing. We would test it and we would deliver on this cycle. And that was like one of the most fun projects I've ever been a part of.
And were you around for the project to come to fruition? Did you get to see it implemented?
So it was currently implemented. We were kind of like iterating on it at the company. And then Traction was going through a bit of a transition phase as well. They were kind of prepping to sell, even though they weren't telling us that, to Salesforce. So there was two kind of different directions that product could have gone. I decided to leave Traction before they sold it to Salesforce, just because I was feeling like I wanted to potentially try this independent contractor life. It was during the pandemic. I was by myself a lot in my apartment in Toronto, and I ended up going to Costa Rica for 6 months in the second year. And that's where I met a lot more digital nomads who were working remotely. And I was like, I could do this too. It's so nice to be able to work by the beach. So that's what kind of kicked off this whole new idea of how to work and live. And I felt like enough experience within the Salesforce ecosystem at that point. I'd worked on at least 5 major projects across PM, QA, BA. I managed teams of developers. I managed delivery teams across multiple geographies at that point, and I'd managed products. So I felt like at that point I could take a step back and say, okay, maybe someone will just need me a couple hours a week here and there. And it ended up working out. So that's where I decided to take a step back and then start Amanda Perkins Consulting Inc. So, and knock on wood, working.
That's a lot of fun. And so currently you're independent. Do you have any other people on your team, or really it's just you and you're consulting with the different, SIs and customers?
Yeah, it's just me right now. I have kind of dabbled with the idea of bringing other people on. I've just been trying to keep my life pretty simple these days because I've moved Portugal. So that's been like a huge transition as well. So I was trying to not have too many things going on at the same same time. But that's not to say in the future that I wouldn't bring on more people. I think if I were to grow, I think I would try and build out like a really strong Salesforce BA team, because I feel like that's probably the biggest gap in the market right now is super strong business analysts who are able to hear what the clients are saying, but then deduce what they actually mean, which are usually two different things, and to pair it with a technical enough skill set where you won't be just writing requirements that are going to be totally custom just because the client asked you for it. So that's what I find is missing in the market. Kind of hard to teach. So to build out that bench is potentially difficult, but potential in the future. Never say never.
So on that point about the BAs, so where do you think those skills could come from? Like who do you think would be a good person to start pursuing that type of work?
I think people who have a natural curiosity to understand different business processes and like why things work the way that they work, as opposed to just hearing what's happening today. So a lot of the times what I see is people will go into a business and they'll ask like, tell me about how your sales process works. And the client will explain it and they'll say, okay. And that's it. Then they're done. The person that I would be looking for would say, okay, like why was this process set up in the first place? Is it working well? What's not working well? Who's involved in changing processes? Have you tried different things in the past that have worked well or not worked well? And why did they work well or not work well? Are you hitting your goals? Are you not hitting your goals? Like, is it working to make money, or like, are people hitting their quotas? So to take that like next level of understanding the business processes will completely change usually the solutions that are required for the business to operate, as opposed to just like staying at that step one. And then there is an element of critical thinking skills where you say, okay, they said this, but I think what they actually mean was this. And that I think comes from experience, because you've started to talk to like so many different businesses. You've seen the same things happen usually over and over again at a lot of different organizations. Because yes, there are some special snowflakes, but generally problems that organizations face are not that unique. But yeah, it's just a combination of those two skill sets that I think make for a really strong BA.
Okay, so we've got the business analysts. They're in there. They're looking at the requirements. They're understanding what happened, what needs to happen, what might not have happened. What's the next step? Where do they take those requirements to? And then how do you, as a consultant, see that there's going to be a really good implementation after that?
Good point. So there's two next steps, and it's actually kind of happens in parallel. The first is you're going to the stakeholders and you're ensuring that what you heard is correct and that you're on the same page. And a lot of that is just repeating what you've heard like over and over and over again. Because yes, as consultants, we live and breathe Salesforce. We live and breathe requirements. Like this is the structures in which we work are normal. For the clients, they're not normal. This is all very new. Like they're not used to doing projects like this. So you have to be patient with clients and you do have to repeat yourself, and that should be expected. So you're confirming with stakeholders and you're kind of driving them down any decisions that they need to make in order for the solution to be a balance of meeting their requirements, but not a ton of technical debt. And that's the fine line that I always play, because yes, of course, the client wants all their requirements met, but if it means significant tech debt or complicated solutions that they're going to have to manage over time, that's not what they want either, really. It's like I can envision their future selves and they're like, this isn't actually what I signed up for. So you have to balance the requirements with your peer, your solution architect who is solutioning, who's saying, okay, for these requirements, straightforward, solution makes sense. Like there's usually like 10 to 20% that's hard on any project. So you say, okay, we're going to have to do like a bit of a negotiation with this 10 or 20%. And that's where you align on some sort of balance. Sometimes it is super custom and that's the way it has to be, but you have to make sure that everyone is on the same page, that it's going to be super custom and what that means for the organization to support it long term. So the other element of the BA is like almost that like change management hat to say, okay, right now you don't have an IT department. Like you're going to need one to manage this afterwards. So are you willing to invest in that? Or do you want to go less custom so that you don't necessarily need that like super skilled resource to manage it over time?
Yeah, this brings up something that I experience sometimes because, I work with a lot of different implementation partners around the world, from really small kind of, mom and pop shops to pretty big organizations. And sometimes, we'll have a conversation. I'll have a conversation with the SI and we'll talk about, hey, this is kind of the roadmap. This is what they want, so on and so forth. And they'll say, can we connect you with the customer? So So you can show them, a form solution or a document generation solution or something that they're currently missing in that kind of interaction with the Salesforce. And sometimes what will happen is I'll get on a call and the consultant won't be there with the customer. And, in a way I'm representing the consultant and what they want, right? I'm not looking to get the process, way off track. I want them to finish their project with this great consultant that came to us and said, hey, we'd like you to be a part of this project. And so, we'll talk and I'll have an idea of what a lot of the requirements were before I got on the call. But, we start talking and then, the customer starts throwing out all sorts of things. And either that happens or I start showing them things that, I think could be interesting to them. And all of a sudden they're like, we want it all. And I'm like, hold on. I spoke to, whatever your consultant's name is, and they said, you've got a roadmap, right? And they said that they have a plan for what you want to do. Let's bring them into this conversation and see, where they want you to start and where they want you to go. And I love that. For me, like that's great because it's great to be able to show someone all these different things they could do. The question is, are they ever going to implement? Because for me, if they don't implement, it's a loss for me, right? At the end of the day, maybe it was nice that they, signed up for us for a year, but then after a year, if they didn't get through the project as much as they want, it's the relationship isn't going to stand. So thinking about, I think, as you said, like kind of the requirements or the overall vision versus what kind of technical debt it's going to, bring in the short term, super important. And I always love when I can tell what the level and the quality of the consultant is when I'm, speaking to the customer, right? Because they're like, okay, they feel like they were taken care of as opposed to, someone sat with them in a room and just threw tons of stuff at the wall and wanted to see what sticks.
Totally. And a lot of it too is like, sure, you can, hey client, like you want everything? Like, sure. It means like your budget's going to increase and your timeline's going to increase, but like, sure, we can do it all. And you're potentially to change, like, do you have people that are going to manage this alongside us at this, like as fast as you want to go? So like, there's always the option of that. But realistically, there's very rarely the organization that's like, sure, we can throw 5 more people on this. Sure, we have like all this dollars already allocated. And sure, like our timeline can push by a month or 2. Like, it's just so rare that that's the actual true option that, I mean, as a consultant, I always give it as an option because you let the client decide, but you have to explain like what's needed on both sides for it to be successful. And usually the variables are not aligned to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that one of the things when I initially came into, the ecosystem and started selling some of these solutions to Salesforce customers, one of the things that was always a little bit funny to me was seeing always, especially with big companies, the urgency which they have for a solution, and then seeing how those implementations can take forever. Like literally, it can be so long. But people will come and say, we need this for the end of the quarter, or we need this for, next month. And I'm ready to go. Like I've got my team on Slack. They're ready. We're going to start spinning up POCs. We're going to start going through requirements and everything like that. And then, the client just disappears. And then what happens? Well, we've changed priorities. And it's sometimes hard for me because I just see so much wasted manpower, right? And just people who were working on a project who did all of this, discovery, who've gone through all these different vendor evaluations. And then all of a sudden they get kind of, sidetracked by the business to say, okay, not so important anymore. We're going to push this to Q2 of next year, whatever it is. How do you deal with that? Like how set your expectations as a consultant for the fact that things do change and, the project could completely get derailed at any moment. How do you set expectations?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And this happens all the time. So this is not unique. It actually just recently happened to me on a recent project where I was meant to help with a whole new ticketing kind of strategy for them to manage all of their help desk tickets. And they had meant to like consolidate systems by the time I started, and the team was going to be consolidated. But as I continued to work on the project, like the systems were not consolidated, the teams were not consolidated. So that's the great thing about a change order. And I just think that I don't get that personally attached to projects anymore. I used to care and like personally care so much about all my work. And I still do. I still take a lot of pride in the work that I do. But when situations change that are like so far out of my control, that as long as I feel like I'm delivering what is a reasonable deliverable with the change and communicating that. So the way I handled that situation was I was working with our main stakeholder to say, look, based on the way things are now, I don't expect many changes to happen in the time frame we decide for this project. Would you agree? And they would say like, yes. And so we said, okay, let's realign on what a reasonable deliverable is that I can still deliver value to you. So I'm not just like going away, but it's definitely different than what we originally agreed to. So it's like everything. It's a little bit of negotiation, but it's that creativity almost that say, okay, I'm still here. You still have budget for me to help you. So how can I help you that it's a reasonable goal and you can still maintain after I'm gone with your existing structure. And it doesn't just like assume all of the other structures that changed previously.
Yeah, I think that last point is key. Like, how do we continue with this when that point person, that consultant isn't in the picture? And how do we also, not have just full reliance on that person who came in to implement the solution? And one thing that I always, I do find interesting is that, I kind of expected when starting to deal with implementation partners that the basic model was, hey, we want you, to be our customer and we want to support you on a long-term basis. You do see that, but you also see a lot of different partners and projects having kind of a start and an end date. Yeah. And typically when I see a good project, it involves, especially with bigger implementation partners, which I know you've been involved in the past. The plan has in it, built into it, the ability to help these customers gain independence, right? Whether it's, maybe there's a hypercare, whatever it is, but there's going to be a way out of this for the customer. And I always thought that was, kind of cool and pretty interesting, right? Like just as someone who came into this without knowing so much about the Salesforce ecosystem, I would have thought, hey, the partners want to be in this for the long run, right? They want to be with this customer for as long as they can, but that's not what I always see. So I like that. I think that's an important part of a good project.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair to the partners, the reason they're not always like that is especially resourcing projects is really difficult when you have smaller teams. So let's say they're going to keep selling. They're always going to be selling projects. And then to plan out when those next projects can start, it's more profitable for the partners to take on the next big project than to stay on for like a couple hours a week to do hypercare for like a while. So if they planned well, there would be like one or two people that would stay behind and help with that hypercare, but that's not always a reality. So that's the difficult balance that those partners are managing. But luckily with Salesforce these days, there are so many people in the ecosystem that you could get creative with who's supporting you, but they would just have to get up to speed on, the solution. But there's a lot of people in this world that focus on Salesforce. So if you really need someone, there's someone out there that can help you.
Yeah, that's exactly. And I guess, with that, to transition a bit, what have you seen change in the last, 10 years since you got started? And where do you think things are going like in 2024? What are we expecting to see? What are you excited about?
Yeah, great question. When I was at Salesforce, when I was in sales, I sold Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and Pardot. And like platform existed, but like no one sold it. So that was my world. And now you can appreciate there's many more clouds, there's industry verticals, there's specific solutions, there's way more ISV partners than ever existed. I am excited about actually ISVs like Titan, who have solutions that are not necessarily always easy to implement, but a lot more easy to implement than the past. So like we're definitely innovating in a way where non-technical business users can implement really cool solutions for their business side. Salesforce is really, it seems like a bit of an inflection point where they've gotten very big, right? So I think it's best to focus as a partner around a industry or a niche where, at least at the beginning, that you can like kind of drive your journey, as opposed to trying to be something for everyone, because it becomes really difficult to understand all the different solutions out there for every single industry. Like it's nearly impossible. And yeah, we're going to see what this AI stuff is all about. But my presumption right now is we're still at a point where organizations' data is so messy that AI is not going to be that helpful. So Salesforce is like the right company to be talking about AI, I think, because they would be the backbone of it. However, we're still at a place where we're like cleaning up the data. So that's what I'm seeing right now. Like, I think AI is like a cool, buzzy word, but until I truly see an organization have like clean enough data to make any sense of AI for the robots to figure out, then we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. I feel the same way, and obviously haven't really seen it in action yet, but we have seen it thrown around a lot. I'm excited. I'm excited to see like what people are going to be able to do with it. As I said, I was in London on Thursday at this App Exchange Live event, which was a really great event put on by Salesforce. And what was fun about it, a little bit different also, is that they basically didn't invite any implementation partners. They only had a couple there. And we had, reached out to some of our connections in the UK, and we're like, hey, you come to the event? They're like, we didn't exactly get invited. So it was a cool opportunity to kind of match the customers with the ISVs. And Yeah, people are talking about AI. People are saying, hey, we're supposed to be getting these new AI capabilities very soon in our org. We've been told, but it's just, what's it going to be like? I don't exactly know. And it was, were you at Dreamforce this year?
I wasn't at Dreamforce this year. I was at Dreamforce last year. So I guess two years ago.
So I also wasn't, but I did listen to some of the keynotes and things like that. And I mean, the kind of the data cloud and the extra, layer of security and all that stuff, the trust layer, that's what it's called. The trust layer was a big discussion there. And I'm excited to see, what it's going to be like.
Totally. And I think on their latest earnings call, they said AI like 47 times or something. So it is definitely a focus for the company. As long as they don't kill Slack, I'll be happy. I love Slack. I know they're not profiting off of it right now, but I love Slack. So they got to just keep it as a loss leader.
Totally. Yeah. Slack is really great. And one of the cool things that we've been doing with Slack in the last, I'd say 2-3 years, is that's the way we communicate with like our partners. It's just so great. Like we have channels for our partners where we just, are giving them like basically most of our team for support. And it's so fast, so much better than emailing or opening cases. And that's one of the things we love about, Slack is just the way you can talk to external, parties. And, even without using so many of, I know there's so much you can do with Slack these days, and I'm not even doing that much with it just for communication. I think it's a great tool. And have you seen any good implementations of like using Slack with Salesforce?
Yeah, actually at Traction, we had a pretty amazing implementation with Slack and Salesforce. So there was like a wins channel. So anytime a deal closed, there was like a celebratory channel, which is always good for morale, obviously on the sales side. We could also look up Salesforce records in Slack. So if you needed to find like a customer information or a project status, because we also tracked all of our projects, you could like just do a quick / command to find it, as opposed to like having to go back into Salesforce. I think a lot of just like general file sharing that Slack does natively is amazing. And my favorite app recently is Loom. It's a Chrome extension, the video Chrome extension. With Slack and Loom, I do like 80% of my job, which is unbelievable because I'm in Portugal, but none of my team is. So my team members are either in India or other places in Europe or North America. And so we're operating on different time zones. We are working asynchronously a lot of the time. And so using Slack and Loom and then what other like requirements, Jira, to talk through different problems, I feel like it's made my world super easy and amazing to work in.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And yeah, a good tech stack these days is definitely super important. And yeah, I think at one point did like last year, kind of an inventory of all the different things I was using. And I realized like I could cut so much out, right? And just stick with the basics, with Salesforce at the center. And really has been helpful for me. So I guess, before we kind of wrap up this conversation, any advice that you have for people listening to this that maybe are thinking of, hey, I like this space. I like Salesforce, or I want to get into Salesforce, but, I want to find kind of my niche within this place. What would you say is the best way to do that?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a lot of amazing groups to join because I feel like now the world of jobs is found through your network. I think you can still apply to jobs, but it's really difficult. So I would say join the LinkedIn groups. That sometimes there's even Facebook groups of people trying to learn Salesforce and just ask for work. I do think too that having admin is like pretty much the bare minimum now. So when you're thinking about the types of jobs you want to have in the Salesforce ecosystem, think about what skill sets you can bring to the table. So if you're like super organized, really good communicator, maybe you come in as a PM. And I know in this world of Salesforce, like there's so many different PM openings because they're in high demand for all the projects that are still going on. If you are really detail oriented and you like to learn about the platform, but you don't necessarily want to be building, testers like QA analysts are usually needed as well. So think about some of the side non-technical jobs about entering the Salesforce ecosystem because they're usually still very in demand. And then from a BA standpoint, I would say take your past experience in whatever other industry that you've worked in and start to use that potentially as your starting point so that you're coming in with an opinion on some of the challenges that industry is facing as opposed to coming in green. And I think that will help set you up for success around understanding the requirements and having kind of an opinion around how things should be done.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Really appreciate you coming on and speaking to us today. And looking forward to hopefully another conversation in the future where we can maybe see how some of these developments in the ecosystem have progressed.
Totally. Thank you so much for having me, Ben. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Salesforce Radio. Don't forget to subscribe for more exciting discussions, expert tips, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders. Stay connected with Titan, plus the power of the planet's leading CRM. See you next time.